It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's Battle of the Apps time. I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Tecumloops to Secwepemc, within Secwepemc, the traditional and unceded territory of Secwepemc. Thank you all so much for being here with us, both on the webinar and here on campus, which is especially exciting to get to enjoy that in many years of all-round events. This morning, I read an interview with former Supreme Court of Canada Justice Rosalie Abella, and she said something about being a lawyer that really struck me. She said, it's a privilege to be a lawyer, to be in a position to have the training to try to make the small universe of an individual better. The students who are presenting today have joined up that training with the power of technology, as well as generous doses of creativity, passion, empathy, and user-centered thinking. Using Neotologic software, they've created simple, user-friendly tools that anyone can use to get practical legal information tailored for their needs and make their users better. The problems that the students have tackled this year are all ones that are especially meaningful and important for so many people: suffering discrimination at work, taking care of beloved pets, and helping families reunite. They're all things that loom very large in the universe of an individual. In addition to our amazing student teams, who will tell you, we have superstar judges who have the unenviable task of picking a winner. We have Sarah Sutherland and Tom Spraggs, who are joining us on the webinar. Hi. And we have Caroline Nevin and Steve Peterson here with us in Kamloops. And Steve also brought his little boy along. So we have a tiebreaker. I want to thank the Dean of Law, Dalian Millard, for her enthusiastic and generous support of this project. Also, the former Dean, Brad Morse, who got this started. It's a great continuation of this project that you were formative in getting this going. Thanks to Neotologic, and especially Kevin Mulcahy. You guys make the magic happen. And to Cara Karpluk for all her incredible work on this event. And that's enough for me. You want to see the teams. So let's get on with the battle, and may the best team win.
Before we get going, Kevin and Sarah, can you see all right? Can you see our presentation? Blank screen. It's gonna be so much better than that, I promise. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our presentation on the Human Rights Tribunal Claim Advisor. My name is Ben.
My name is Mike.
I'm Pega.
And we're here to tell you about a problem we're trying to solve when it comes to discrimination in employment. We wanted to solve a problem this semester that affected everyone. Well, pretty much everyone. I think maybe Hugo doesn't have a job yet, but most everyone else has some kind of job, some kind of working responsibility, and as a result, some kind of relationship with the work that they have and the person that they are. But not everyone has access to recourse when work doesn't go right. And what we wanted to do was build an application that helped people deal with those issues. So we're going to start off by addressing the problem, and Peg is going to take us there.
So when we were deciding what we wanted to build this semester, I was thinking about my 1L summer. I got to work at the BC Human Rights Clinic through Community Legal Assistance Society. I spent most of my time working in employment issues, and a few things came to my realization. First, the clinic loves to help people, but they don't have the resources to help as many as they'd like. The clinic can't take on clients unless a human rights complaint has been accepted by the tribunal. The tribunal's website is filled with really amazing information and resources, but it's hard to navigate even as law students. And there's a huge backlog with the Human Rights Tribunal. Right now, you're looking at about a year before you find out if your claim's been accepted, and about 3 to 5 years before you have a hearing. So the most important thing I realize is that employees don't always know their rights, and employers don't know their duties and what discrimination actually looks like.
So we built this app to educate employees about their rights under the code, what solutions are available to them under the Human Rights Tribunal, and to guide employees through the HRT process. Our application allows employees to address their employment concerns in 2 ways. First, employees can get help writing an accommodation letter to their employer, or they can get a tailored report about their HRT claim.
So this is Emma. She's a potential user of our app. She loves her job. She works at a big grocery store as a cashier, but she has a physical disability. She has severe arthritis, and it's hard for her to stand for long periods of time. She went to her employer and asked whether he would be willing to get her an ergonomic chair and whether she'd be allowed to sit while working at the cashier. Her employer told her that it looked bad and that the chair was too expensive. Emma feels like that her employer can't dismiss her disability. She doesn't know where to start. She doesn't know where to go. And all of this is making her feel really anxious and kind of small.
Emma's right. The BC Human Rights Code protects people from discrimination, but it's difficult to find out how and what she needs to prove to establish her claim. Emma must be part of a protected class. She must experience a negative treatment, and there must be a nexus between those 2 things. Let's show you how Emma can go through our app to get help.
So Emma will open our application and see a landing page that basically gives her information about whether or not she has a viable claim for the Human Rights Tribunal, and then potentially whether she can fill out an accommodation letter. She opens the app, there's information about the BC Human Rights Code, about the tribunal, as well as some of the questions that she'll be asked, including whether she has a personal characteristic, whether she's experienced negative treatment, and whether there's a connection between those 2. So let's start her session for Emma. Emma will open on a disclaimer saying that this is not legal advice. As the lawyers in the room will know, no one other than lawyers can give legal advice. It just provides legal information. Subsequent to that, she'll be asked a series of questions that we call screener questions, basically to determine whether Emma's claim could be dealt with by the BC Human Rights Tribunal and whether our app can actually help her. If she were to click outside of BC for her employer location, she'll be prompted by telling her that the app does not apply to her. Thankfully, her employer is in BC, and she can proceed. She'll then be asked whether she's employed by a federal employer, someone who's governed by federal human rights code legislation. In this case, she's not in any of these particular employment relationships, so no, she does not work for that and can continue. Finally, there'll be a question with a pop-up guiding her about what the negative action could be, about whether this possible harm that she's experienced has happened within the past year. If a claim is over a year old, the BC Human Rights Tribunal will sometimes be able to deal with it, but it often has to pass a test of being in the public interest to be able to go forward. Thankfully for her, it was in the past year, she can move ahead. She'll then be prompted with the first part of the test that basically asks whether she has a protected characteristic. Here, if she's confused about what any of those definitions mean, we've drawn from definitions from the BC Human Rights Clinic to show what each of those might mean to her and whether they apply to her situation. In her case, we know that she has a physical disability through her arthritis, so we'll click that. Then based on mental and physical disability, there's a series of obligations that she has, as well as her employer, to show whether or not there's been a duty to disclose that disability or a duty to inquire. And those things are slightly in tension in the sense that if you have a disability, you have to volunteer some of this information that could be quite personal to you, but it's also incumbent on your employer to provide some sort of accommodation or help to make sure that they fit in to your workplace and that you're getting a proper accommodation where appropriate. So here, Emma will be prompted on what an accommodation could be, what it could look like. And in her case, she has asked her employer if she wants an accommodation already. She's also disclosed her disability. Her employer is aware of her arthritis, and in this case hasn't necessarily helped her out with that. And she has requested an accommodation, that being a chair and to be able to sit while she's working. She'll go forward, and then she'll be asked when she experiences harm, either before employment, during, and during kind of covers after as well as being terminated. That's all governed by the code. In her case, she experienced it during her employment, and she had a reasonable accommodation denied. Now, here's where our app does some of the heavy lifting that's important to get a sense of. The legal test, as Mike outlined, is this idea of the connection between class, harm, and something happening between those two things. It doesn't have to be the only thing. It doesn't even have to be the most major thing. It just has to have some sort of overlap between the two. Now, to prove that, Emma's going to need to have some sort of evidence or proof, although she doesn't need something as strict as potentially a BC Supreme Court case. She just needs to be able to talk about what happened to her, but it'll help her claim and strengthen it if she's able to prove explicit evidence. So in this case, that would be some sort of evidence that's really straightforward. If she clicks that, she'll go through and she'll see there's a bunch of options that come from a lot of other previous BC Human Rights Tribunal decisions of what that would look like. If she didn't have explicit evidence, she could say, I have circumstantial evidence of some sort of overlapping thing. Maybe she had heard a coworker talking about it, experienced negative treatment that wasn't particularly demonstrable. Or she can say she has no evidence. She can still pursue the claim, but she'll be warned that it might not be as conclusive or as easy to go forward. So in this case, we know that she had a conversation with her employer with explicit evidence. We'll move forward. Now, here's where our app comes to a bit of a crossroads and where we tried to infuse some of our research and understanding of what the BC Human Rights Clinic has been doing and how we thought we could fill a gap there. The problem with a lot of the BC Human Rights Tribunal is that a lot of claims will settle, they'll mediate, that's not a bad thing, but it's necessarily important to get through the tribunal's process to do that, which wastes resources and time and energy and can sometimes mean that the backlog gets added to. So we wanted to give anyone going through this process the ability to file a claim, the ability to feel empowered to do so, but also an option to take matters into their own hands and potentially mediate outside of this particular solution. We can't help them mediate themselves, but we can start that conversation between an employee and an employer to hopefully create some sort of ability to help with that. So I'm going to walk through how someone would file an employment discrimination complaint. Then Mike's going to talk about how Emma's situation would probably be best served first by writing this letter. We're going to file a complaint with the Human Rights Tribunal and go forward. Now, based on all the information that Emma's already given, we populated this report with the fact that she has a physical disability, that she's asked about an accommodation, she's disclosed it, and has requested one. And it goes forward and talks a little bit more about what these employer duties are for her to be accommodated. Also defenses an employer could use to say, well, we're actually justified in not being able to accommodate because it's way too onerous and too demanding for us to do. So there's a lot of information there, and it's helpful for Emma because she'll know there's a next step if she wants to go to the BC Human Rights Clinic for a consultation. We want more hands-on information and help from an actual legal trained person. She can also download a report in a PDF format, which is basically just this web page in one go, or she can have that report emailed to her, which works really well. Now, Mike's going to talk a bit about how a letter would be written and go forward with that.
So the letter would make more sense for Emma in this particular instance. And it's going to summarize here her employer, her manager, her job title, all the relevant information that she would need to move forward with contacting her employer to request accommodation.
And we've pre-filled this form out just so that it already has information just for simplicity's sake, but everyone going through this app would then fill out the information that's pertinent to them.
So here Emma would be able to review her information and move forward with contact her employer. Ultimately, this is what Emma's going to have as the outcome to describe her disability and the accommodation that she needs. So here we have section 13 of the BC Human Rights Code, which will help inform Emma about her rights. As well, we have some of the duties of the employer to the point of undue hardship just here at the bottom to balance out the focus of the employee and the employer.
We didn't want the letter to be used, weaponized kind of by the employee. We wanted to make sure that the employer also knows that they have rights and limits to their duties. And we wanted to inform both parties that the duty to accommodate in BC Human Rights Code is a conversation between employers and employees, and it's a give and take, and it's finding that middle ground.
Hopefully, most employers want employees that feel safe and accommodated and understood in that particular process. Sorry.
So in Emma's situation, she downloaded her letter, she took it to Jimmy, her boss, they had a conversation. Emma knows her rights now, and now Jimmy knows his duties, not just to Emma, but to future employees as well.
So the app overall reduces costs, reduces the tribunal's caseload by allowing mediation and for employees to just contact their employer and not go through the arduous process of litigation. It's quick, free, and accessible, and it educates employees about their rights.
That concludes our presentation for the time being, but we just want to give a special thank you to Professor Katie Sykes, to Kevin Mulcahy, and then of course we mentioned Laura Track, the director of the BC Human Rights Clinic, and I guess former boss, who was very accommodating, for all their incredible help and guidance and just encouragement on working through this problem all semester. They were all incredibly helpful. And finally, of course, our judges and to our audience members, thank you all for being here. And we welcome everyone.
So we have some time for the judges to ask the panel questions. Team.
Are you gonna be able to see those guys?
We can make them bigger.
Yeah, we can
Trace on sharing.
do that. We have the technology. There we
There
go.
Just so we can see more of everyone.
Would anyone like to kick off? Keep on.
Go for it.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation. I have to say, I'm absolutely, am I muted still? Can you hear me okay?
Tom?
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, I think we might have just turned her down.
Okay.
Hang on.
Can you try again? Sorry.
Can you hear me okay?
Okay, we need Kara to help us.
Just 1 sec, sorry.
No problem.
I hear you fine.
You're great. Then I will not speak too loudly.
Thank you, Kara.
Okay, great.
Go for it, sorry. We can hear you.
Can you receive audio okay?
Yes.
Okay, super. Well, first of all, great work. Really impressed. One of the questions I have is, in the journey where people are feeling overwhelmed by information, have you thought about what kind of supports they could maybe reach out to that are more than just computer-based, like community resources? I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, so in the report option, we give a link to the short service clinic that the BC Human Rights Clinic offers on Monday and Wednesdays. Before you file a complaint, you can sign up for a 30-minute conversation with either a legal advocate or a lawyer. So that's kind of the main source we've given people to talk to a real person and not just a questionnaire.
Thank you.
I liked that you linked directly into their booking software. I thought that was really smart. Or their landing page for booking. I think that you, Tom, you nailed the biggest thing, which is all digital is not going to be sufficient for something as complex and nuanced as human rights law. So having some off ramps. But what I really liked about this app was the report that you generate that allows someone to transfer relevant information to the next step in their journey, whatever that is.
One of the things we didn't maybe quite address is that the BC Human Rights Tribunal claim form is 18 pages long.
Yeah.
So it's pretty, I mean, we all looked at like, how would you even fill this out? And we're law students who are keen and excited. So it's something that we wanted to really equip people with. It's just something that they had as a deliverable or a product, just to feel like, okay, I've got my app's outcome. I can kind of look through this, work through it. And then also, if you Google, have I been discriminated against in BC? There's a lot of amazing resources, but it's not really clear how you use all of them. And so wherever we have referenced them, I think most we have an ability wherever it links to the code that we link to a section, we link to the BC Human Rights Tribunal website, just so people know, here's where this is, here's where this lives. And hopefully if they have further questions that we again can't cover in the app, given its sort of relatively like basic but targeted approach, hopefully they have a sense that they've got other resources available to them as well.
I liked this a lot. It's a really nice app, so congratulations on that. I liked that you provided that kind of technical off-ramp. It's like, well, if you're in these particular situations, you don't have to go this way that perhaps people think is the way that they need to go. And so giving them that information once you have context for them, I think is a really valuable thing. One thing, because I was going through the app, your app, and the other students' apps. One thing I just like to give feedback on is I didn't feel there was a little bit about the navigation that was difficult. And so what I found was when I got to the end, I couldn't go back unless I went back through every step. And I this was the same for all three apps today. So like, it's a shared thing, but I imagine that there would be a desire for people to go through it and kind of populate it randomly and just kind of see where it goes and then go back and maybe do it again. And so that would just be a use case that I would encourage you to consider if you were going to continue with this. But I think the things like being able to pull the letter out is great. Having something that they can walk away with that way.
There is actually a start over button, but it is hidden. So,
Oh, I didn't see it.
there's a little 3 lines, but yeah, we should make that more apparent. For sure. Thank you.
I had a couple things. First off, I really enjoyed the kind of didactic nature of it, and even that I was trying to educate both sides of the equation, right? Like you have an employer on one side, you have an employee on the other. Your app is geared for the employee and it's going to speak to their needs and concerns, but one of the options for the employee is an educational piece for the employer. And even an educational piece for the employer that could potentially then serve the employee very well if it does need to go to a tribunal, right? Because it clearly lays out what's going on and what was asked for. But it also sort of extends kind of an olive branch to this employer to, let's say, like, hey, listen up, pay attention to this, here's some reasons why. And here's even the other side of the coin as far as, there is, limits to how much accommodation they're going to be required to make. So I thought looking at it through that lens and even looking at it through, what is the best outcome for this individual, the individual that you showed in this case, this you identified her as someone that feels small.
Mhm.
And so all of a sudden with this letter, she doesn't feel as small. And if her desire is just to get a chair at work, the quickest way to do that would be to educate her employer and bring them on board. And so I felt that, doing that really spoke to getting a good outcome for this individual. For another individual that's in a different situation, maybe a more serious issue, well, then the report would be the way to go. But I thought that this app really served that kind of, I don't know, you often talk about it with a missing middle as far as access to justice. These are people that weren't extremely wrong. These are people that aren't going to get a lawyer to maybe jump on board and take their case up to the tribunal, but they're people with legal issues. And so something like an app that could help them get to a good solution, I think is fabulous. I also like the navigation as far as kind of giving the user feedback immediately if they have indicated something that's going to stop their progress or is going to say you don't move forward to the next step. So I think having that there, I think having the logic as far as like when they're laying out what evidence they have, as far as they're clicking on something and then it's bringing them, okay, here's likely forms of evidence that you would need based on stuff that's already been to the tribunal. Like I thought those kind of things were really good, good tools to have. And yeah, I didn't have an, I thought it's probably long. It's probably quite a process to go through for somebody. I don't know if there's a good way to shorten it up. I guess I would need to look at the logic behind the questions to see, wow, what if we listed a few on one screen? Because then there's a few less steps or something. But anyway, I really enjoyed it. So great work.
Mhm.
Just to respond to that comment. So I think part of we give credit to both Professor Sykes and Kevin for this, but it's this tough thing of trying to balance what becomes almost obvious to us as law students of, oh, well, this is the legal process. This is how you go through it. And having to just break down, like, what is discrimination? Like, we had to all look up, like, what does this look like for everyday person? And I think to your point about the sort of potential of an employer is, I think you jump to someone nefarious that's thinking, how do I screw over this person who I really hate from some bigoted reason? And oftentimes it's just people don't understand what their responsibility is to their employee. And it's just about understanding and empowering people to feel like they're able to ask for the accommodation, the recourse, or just the help they need. And so our app vastly simplifies what discrimination can look like, but it tried to capture, I think, to your point, some of the consistent themes that we saw in both the case law and I think also just in human rights legislation in general, that people want the help that they request. Employers want to help out as best they can. That makes sense for them. And then people don't really want to go to court. They don't want to litigate. They don't want to fight over these things. So hopefully there's, again, some didactic pedagogical element to the app that's sort of helping empower and teach people what it is that's involved, and then hopefully feel disincentivized from having to go and actually like duke it out in a tribunal and have complaints.
I thought you did a really good job with the explicit versus circumstantial evidence as well, because that is not an easy topic. I thought you did a great job on that. Yeah, you did a great job.
I saw Tom who commented that he has comments. So,
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't sure if that was to Professor Sykes or not, but there you go. That's another comment. I thought you did a good job in those respects.
You, sorry, I didn't mean to out your direct message.
This group sucks. Oh my God. Any other questions, comments?
This is totally random, but as I was watching you guys, I kept thinking what this would look like in another jurisdiction where discrimination claims could be brought forward in a court where there's no intermediary or gatekeeping function through an administrative tribunal or actor. And it made me wonder if you had some kind of feature where people could log information about like daily logs about sort of how they're doing at their jobs and so forth. And an app would collect that sort of information. And you could then sift through it and essentially use that as intake to sue employers directly in certain types of, I don't know, I was thinking about it as I was watching you guys thinking about it in another jurisdiction. Very, very, this is such a great exercise. It's just, yeah, it's fantastic. You did such a good job.
That'll be version 2.
next step.
Thank you.
I think we're ready for this.
That was pretty
Smooth right up to there.
I like screeched mine up. Thanks, Pega. Yeah, like Pegasus.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm fine. I'm not acknowledged.
It's on your home computer. Clear access to it.
Yeah.
Then like
I love it. I love it.
So it's not fair. You have bugs. Like it's just not fair. Oh, that would be perfect. I would love that.
All right, so my name is Belle and this is my partner Andrew, and we created the Pet Trust app. Andrew, why don't you go ahead and introduce?
Sure, thanks, Mel.
Yep.
So this puppy here is was sent to me by Professor Sykes. It's her beloved pugs. I had an idea of
So I'm sorry to interrupt. We have the wrong monitor displaying on the Zoom.
Don't see a pug?
No, we see Tom's Rivers University current students COVID safety.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Thanks for telling us. Sarah, is that better?
Perfect. Thank you.
Excellent.
so yeah, I was gonna say that Val had an idea of bringing an actual puppy or something as a prop or a show and tell item, but we couldn't get one. I went to the pet store and they said that they weren't comfortable letting me get a puppy. So does anyone here have pets? Yeah, what do you guys have? Anything? Yeah.
2 rat cats.
Any dogs here? Okay. So how long do dogs and cats live? Like how old are your dogs and cats?
Forever.
So the world record for oldest dog is just shy of 30 years. I think it's like 29.6 years, something like that. And I looked up the world record for a cat. It's allegedly 38 years. So it's quite long. And how much does it cost to raise a pet every year? Does anybody know?
Depends on the drugs to keep them alive.
Depends on the pet, depends on, you know, the health conditions, but the Ontario Veterinary Medical Association estimates it to be about $3,700 a year. So that's before inflation, before adjusting for inflation and unexpected medical costs. So imagine that. We'll round up to 4,000 just to, for simplicity's sake. But imagine you have a pet. How old is your dog, Belle?
He's 4.
4. Imagine Belle's dog becomes the next world record holder, becomes 30. So that's 30 more years at $4,000 a year. That's $120,000. So almost makes you want to get a goldfish, doesn't it? So I'm sure we all have someone in mind that we think would be a great person to to look after a pet if something were to happen to us, because life is unpredictable, accidents happen, you know, we get injured, that kind of thing. So who's that person? It could be a family member or friend, but have you told them that it could be tens of thousands or potentially $100,000 that of a commitment that they'd be taking on? Have you asked them? And also a potential 20-year commitment, who knows, right? So that's kind of why we built this app, to get people thinking about how much money is required and what are some of the things that you might need in the future. Belle, you want to talk about the inspiration for the app?
Sure, thank you, Andrew. Okay, so our app is inspired by a few loved ones. Professor Sykes' beloved pugs that passed away, and my own dog, Kobe. Kobe is still alive, but what would happen to him if something were to happen to me? Therefore, it is important to make sure that we choose the right person that can best take care of our beloved pets. That is the point of our app, Pet Trust. Pet Trust is meant to keep your pet out of shelters and prevent them from being abandoned, and for users' peace of mind. In 2019 alone, in Canada, more than 100,000 cats and dogs were surrendered to shelters. The key reasons being abuse, transfers from other organizations, strays, and approximately 35% were surrendered by their owners. Shelter stays can impact an animal's health, welfare, and behavior. Andrew, why don't you go ahead and open up the app?
Sure. So you'll see the link here. It's a little bit different than the link I sent out, only because I registered this earlier today, and it takes about 24 hours to propagate across the internet, the name servers. So if you go to petdocs.ca/demo, it may or may not work right now, but you could potentially, depending on your region. So this is the home screen of our app, and goes a little bit about kind of what we just talked about there. Did you want to go into a little bit of detail, Belle?
Sure. So a trust is important because it's an agreement that allows the user to control how their money is put aside while they're alive. If the user were to die without a trust for their pet, family members could be left deciding what happens to their pet or what happens to your beloved pet.
Before going to the next screen, I'll show you a quick feature that is built into Yoda. It's a ability to change languages. So I think maybe French would be appropriate here. So you're able to change to, I don't know how many, but it seems like quite a large selection of numbers. So languages, sorry. So I'll change that back to English. Here. And that's the next page. So just some intro screens explaining what the app does and how it can help you. And we have a quick disclaimer. This is a preliminary question just to see if the person is ready to proceed. So it goes over what a trust is, what are some of the things that they might need, caregiver, a name of a caregiver, a trustee, to make sure that they've actually spoken to this person. And so assuming that the user's done this, we'll proceed. The first screen is a personal information screen. We've pre-populated it with some user info just to give the user some guidance as to what they need to put in there. So here we have, for the sake of demonstration, we'll just stick with the sample data. So here we have Pam. She has, say, 1 pet. And we proceed to the pet screen, also pre-filled with some information. But if you want to add, say, an additional pet, you could just click the plus sign. If you want to decrease that, you can just click the X. And pet ID is something like a pet municipal license number or some other unique identifier. It's optional, but it's if they have it. The next screen is the trust information. So do you want to go into a little bit more detail for the screen and what we'll need?
Yeah, so in terms of choosing a trustee, as you can see, so I've gone over what Pet Trust is. So that here, there's some guidance here. The trustee is responsible for managing the money. The trustee can be almost anyone. They control the trust on behalf of the caregiver, but a user should choose a trustee based on how responsible and honest they are, which is what we recommend, and if they are expected to outlive the caregiver and the user of the app. Andrew?
Right, and so along the way, we have some guidance, some pop-ups to further clarify in case the user needs it. But here we have the name of the trust, so that could be something like the Pet Care Trust of Pam or Pet Care Trust 2022, something along those lines. And here we can put a dollar amount for how much we want to put in the trust. Say, maybe Pam wants to put a little more, but maybe 160,000. And we have the names of the trustees as well as the secondary and successor trustee and the second successor trustee. So that's backup people in case your first or your second choices aren't available at the time the trust goes into effect. And then we have a trust fee amount. So that's our trustee fee amount. That's something that can be given to the trustee annually to cover expenses like bank account fees, etc. The next screen is the caregiver information screen. So do you want to go into what that entails?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So the caregiver is also the beneficiary. The caregiver should be separate from the trustee because they have separate functions. The trustee manages the money and the caregiver takes care of the pet because there are a lot of funds being left behind. Leaving a trustee to manage the money for the caregiver over the long term is important. This ensures that the funds are being managed honestly and accurately, just in case. Also, if something were to happen to the caregiver, the trustee would also be there. Go ahead, Andrew.
And we also have a alternate caregiver in case your first choice becomes unavailable, and a temporary caregiver. So that'd be someone who, if your first two choices become unavailable, they will look after your pet temporarily until they can find a permanent solution or a permanent home for your pet. And in that case, the trustees defer to the temporary caregiver for in their best judgment as to how to care for your pet. And finally, we have a caregiver bonus box. So that's it's optional, but it's something nice to give. It's a small token of appreciation to your caregiver annually that would come from the trust amount. So say in this case, you want to give the caregiver $500 a year. In our final screen here, we have a preview of the document that was generated. So the questions that were asked along the interview will fill in the document itself, and it's bolded so you can easily point that out. So we have trustee information, caregiver information, some of the bonuses and trustee fees that we had mentioned. Termination date would be when the pets are no longer alive, in which case if there are funds left over in the trust account, it would be given to the caregiver as the beneficiary. And then they would.
That's not a slight conflict?
Caregiver, not the trustee.
What's that?
Given to the caregiver. Oh, you mean like they might kill their
Just wondering.
Choose someone you trust.
So finally, the user would print out this document, sign it, have their witnesses sign it, their successors sign it, and this is some instructions in regards to that. So if they already have a lawyer who created a will for them, this would be brought to that lawyer because it does go hand in hand with your will. Your will would say pets are property, so your will would dictate who gets that property, and then this document says how they're cared for, where the money's coming from, that kind of thing. And they don't have a lawyer then, or they haven't created a will, then this would be something that they would bring when they get a will made. And also a reminder to change this periodically as trust lasts after 21 years. So that might sound like a long time, but if you have a parrot or a tortoise or something, you might have to make this 3 or 4 times in their lifetime. And that's just a little reminder here. Finally, you can download the document in PDF or a Word format, and you can also email it to yourself. So I do want to preview a little bit of what we're doing next. So this last week, Belle and I were thinking, what else do we need to make this a more complete app, something that would bring value to the end user? So she was giving me ideas all week and telling me to code it. So I'll show you what we have here. I like to call this what we just showed here, the guest form. And then if you go to petbox.ca/demo, should work. We kind of expanded that first slide show that we showed to more of a landing page website. It's not complete yet, so it has some sample information, but this would be what like a landing page would look like for it.
We do plan on continuing this afterwards too.
For sure. So if you continue as guest, you would be directed to where we just came from. Let's go back and say you want to log in or register. If you do want to log in and say you want to log in as, I don't know, Andrew Fu and password. Well, I didn't register, so it will give me an incorrect username and password. But I can register. Oops. Go to register. So I'll say Andrew Fu, put password as password, email. Simple like that. Okay. And if I go to login, password, we'll see a dashboard here where you create documents, edit documents, view the documents you created, as well as see things like your username, change your password, that kind of thing. You can log out, you have an about and a help page. So I'll show you what the creating a document is without going too far into it. There is form validation, so I'm not going to proceed further than this. I'll show you what it looks like if you already have documents created. So say you had other documents created, you go here, but we don't have any because I just registered. So what I'll do is I'll log out and I'll log back in under the account that Belle had made earlier. So that would be Belle. And so this is a list of documents she made earlier. This is her first version and she made a second version. I think versions are important because it's legal documents or timestamped. You can't go back and edit past versions. So here's the first version here. She put her dog Kobe, a German Shepherd. She put her pet trust as Trust of Belle. And it was created at, I think this time is wrong, but 7:07, I think that's probably Eastern time or something. And if I go back to the home page, or actually if I go back to the other documents, this is the more recent one. So it was created a few moments later, and she changed the name to Trust of Belle 2022. The advantage of being able to log in and create further documents this way is that it can save time. You can store your documents as well. So if you go to edit documents, instead of having to create a new one every 6 months or a year, you can edit the last version, but without writing over it. So it'll save you a lot of time. So it's pre-populates with your name. Some things aren't pre-populated yet, like the pet. But say we choose one pet, we put the same information, Kobe, dog, shepherd, so right. And then all the other information should enter is already there from before. And say the only change she wants is maybe the amount. Say she wants to put $20,000 and change it to say 2022 November. Like so. Else, you'll see a quick preview here. Scroll down. And then you save the document, you'll see it here. And that's a new timestamp and the new name is here, Trust of Belle 2022. And I think the only other feature we want to look at was, so you go back to view, there's two previously, and the one we just created shows up there. There are some other things I'm working on, cloud storage. So the idea would be to print out the document, sign it, scan it, re-upload it as a PDF. Didn't have time to finish it for today, but maybe on the weekend I can finish it before our submission on Monday. So that would be something like scan it, upload it, and you'd be able to look at the most current version you've uploaded. I think that's everything we have. So I'll just log out.
That's great.
Oh, stop sharing. Yeah, perfect.
Any questions or comments?
Who's gonna stop?
Where did the language thing come from? Is it just integrated Google Translate or?
So Neota has it built in, but you can add it to any website. It's a Google script. You can get it from I don't remember the name of it, but it's just a piece of JavaScript you put in the head of a HTML document, and then you put the rest of the snippet in any page you want it to appear in.
Thank you.
I got something. Oh, Tom beat me to it. Okay, Tom, you go first.
Oh, no, go ahead. I went first last time. Please go ahead.
Okay. I really like that you were tackling trusts because trusts are like very complicated and a bunch of pageantry is involved. So when I first saw this, I pictured like a settler's gift of milk bone being like taped to a trust agreement. Like there's all kinds of stuff involved in trust. So I'm really glad that you guys thought, hey, we need to help people with this. And I think this is something people care a lot about and don't maybe have the money or wouldn't be able to maybe get things done another way. So I feel the way you tackled it is fabulous, and the way you tackled it is really good. I did kind of hope though to see maybe something more along the lines as far as having maybe a settler or kind of like the more official trust stuff that would need to get taken care of that maybe people don't want to. And I could have used some, I really like how you break it down and you break down, okay, do you want to give the trustee something? Hey, do you want to give the caregiver something? I think in the questions though, or as far as what the client goes through, explaining how the money works there would have been fabulous. It explains it at the end, which was good. I would have infused that up front so that the person going through can see, because it's just really complicated for people to understand that relationship with the trustee and the beneficiary of the trust. And I think, what you're trying to set up is, leave this pot of money, have somebody responsible for the money to dole it out at somebody else's benefit that's taking care of the dog. It creates some checks, which is really important and is really what people want. And I think that's really good. And what you've set up is really, really great. I also like seeing sort of the step 2 and the idea that you've, sort of set up a place where you could house the documents and where you could update the documents without sort of starting again from scratch. I didn't see the necessary, the business case or for a trust document. The beautiful thing about a trust document is hopefully you just do it once and you don't have to touch it again. Like that's kind of the idea. But, the principle of being able to take a precedent that you've done before and update it for whatever the new circumstance is really good. And I mean, it could apply to a trust. I mean, if your trustee goes and your secondary goes, but I mean, the hope is, and I think how you set up your original trust documents is you do it and then it's done forever, hopefully. But anyway, I thought you guys did some really cool stuff. So thanks so much.
And we like that because we want to keep going with this. So thank you.
Tom, do you want to go next?
Sure, thank you. I'm happy to go last because I went first last time. Sarah, did you want to go ahead of me, please? No? Okay, sorry, thank you. Well, first of all, really good job. I have 2 cats and a dog, and I was really kind of working through your app and seeing how could I use this, and I thought it was really neat. Your document export was excellent. I thought the documents looked amazing. The way you've woven it together was really cool. Also really liked how you used the names of my favorite TV show. I don't know how you knew that, but like the Office characters in there was pretty cool. So one of the things to think about with all the power, like this is a robust app. One of the challenges with apps is you can see how much you can do, and then you got to figure out what you don't want it to do. And the one comment I'd make was, have you thought through the use case of what do you do when you need someone else to take care of your pets? Because that's actually a trust too. It's just a different kind of trust. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about that.
Would that be like a temporary situation if you were like out of the country, or? Would that be like a temporary situation if you were out of the country or just needed someone to look after your pet for a short duration?
Exactly, yeah.
We didn't really think about that, but that'd be an excellent feature to put in where you can make like a version of the trust for that specific purpose.
No, that's great. I actually wrote that down. We're gonna think about that too. Thank you.
Is there anything like this out there?
We couldn't really find it. Like we found general trust and then on the side pets, like we found stuff like that, but it was really complicated. It was just so much. And then I thought about what if it's just, we wanted to make something that was just simple and to the point, right? I mean, there's just so much information everywhere. We just wanted something really simplified and really just, focusing on one thing, which is our pets. And that's it.
It's very cool.
There's a couple of will generating companies. I think one is Willful and I think there's legalwills.ca. So I don't think it'd be too hard for them to implement this. I think I did see blogs on their sites. That was our original idea. We wanted to build a competitor to that. We just didn't have time to build. Rules are much more complex than a pet trust. So this is where we're starting. We'd like to add that next.
Thank you. I thought this was great. Wondering though, like if a person dies intestate, did you have any sort of, like I see this document in conjunction with the will? But if a person dies intestate, how would you handle that without a will?
Yeah, so that's kind of why we put the information at the end that kind of bring this to your lawyer.
Get a will done.
Yeah, who made your will. So there is kind of I guess like a black hole there. So we do want to add that will component to this so that it becomes a package. So yeah, I did see that there is an issue there.
So I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just thought like it would be like a potential database of some sort, you know, that people could even find out, like if you're a trustee or if you're the caregiver, like how do you go about letting people know? Like would the owner of the pet during their lifetime be responsible for notifying everybody? Like, is that what you had in mind?
So the document currently only requires a witness and trustee signature, so your trustee would know. So we didn't have that information here, but hopefully the trustee would then notify these people. But the next, I guess, features in the app would be to add more information to get contact information in there for those people. And then also the abilities to, when you're done, not just email it to yourself, but email it to these people, and then create a like a temporary login so that they can't modify the documents, but they can still view them. And these people do.
Awesome.
You're getting my daughter.
Our last judge needs to go.
Oh, this is great. I really enjoyed this one too. I just have this vision of the power users that you would get who were like amending these trusts every day or every week and like changing the beneficiaries and then anyway. But I think you would end up with some interesting use patterns. And I think that you would also end up with people having better plans for the way that their pets would be looked after they died than they would have for their children. But yeah, it looks great to me.
We'll sort out some.
I could really see this as something that could be really well used independently, but also perhaps if you could have some kind of relationship or referral with a third-party organization like the SPCA or you know, the veterinarian professional association. I don't know exactly who it would be, but if you could get some kind of agreement with a third party, I think that could really help to get it lifted off the ground, because you could have a big channel of users then, I think, because there's a lot of people who care about this a lot.
That's amazing feedback. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, 100%. So part of the feature there that I'm hoping to implement is the cloud storage. So I want to do things like store your pet's license certificate, store their perhaps their insurance certificate, other documents, so to kind of have it all in one place, and then to also communicate with those organizations, whether it be the city or insurance companies, maybe even connect to their API so that we can automatically get the documents without having to do anything manually.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing, if you're going to carry this further, which I think you definitely should, I think it's totally marketable. I think that you do need to think about some options and clearer guidance when the pet dies.
Yeah.
If there's a big chunk of money that's taken out of somebody's estate and managed by someone else who isn't managing the rest of the estate, and there's a big chunk left, say in a couple of years, I could see that being a litigation fun time. Yeah.
You might also want to take a moment for kind of a public service announcement. It's like, while you're out doing this, maybe you should consider making a will.
Yeah.
We know you care about your pets, but maybe you should look after other stuff too.
App for the wills and link that to it.
Yeah, so a lot of what we did here can be reused for a will. We just have to change the text, change the logic a little bit, but it's a good foundation for a more complex document. So I don't know if you recall, but in the dashboard there, I have documents and pet trust as one option. The idea is to add other options for other types of documents that you would generate.
Yeah, just to kind of go on off the communication comment that came over here. I thought that was fabulous, and I think you've got a tremendous opportunity to help educate the people around this, and even help the person that's trying to do this educate the other people, because it's just a peculiar relationship, and a lot of people just don't quite understand it. They maybe understand some parts of it, and so yeah, your app supplying like, okay, you want to set this up, here are the people that you want to use. Okay, we're going to send a message to each of these people that kind of explains their role. And then, like you said, gives them a link to the document so they can see it. You know, you guys wouldn't be in a position to craft some messaging around that explains it really clearly, so that this person, you know, when they're on the phone, they're not trying to like get this guy from square one to you're my trustee, or, you know, you're the beneficiary of this trust and you're taking care of my pets. So yeah, I thought there's a great, great service that it can provide there for sure.
For pets with known medical needs, would you think of putting a piece at the end of this that says, this is the veterinarian of the pet, pick up medical information here? Or would you integrate the medical information of the pet into the app for the person who has to take care of it?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think if maybe along the interview questions, having a section there to put in the veterinarian's contact information, is that what we mean?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. I like that. And ideally grab all their emails, put them in there so that they all get emailed, because they'll have access, but then they also might have pets themselves, and that's a great way to expand.
I think we're ready for the.
Say thank you so much for the judges and everyone that had feedback. I'm glad everybody was more receptive for it, just because as Professor Sykes knows, like, well, and as anybody with pets knows, this really came from a place of love. So thank you so much. Good check. Can you guys see it? Yes. Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Halance Mandari.
Hi, my name is Kimia Shiri.
Hi, my name is Maria Gerges, and we are the daughters of immigrants.
Hi, my name is Denisa Plan, and I am the granddaughter of immigrants.
Hi, my name is Erin Pelipo, and I'm the great-granddaughter of immigrants.
Whether our family members were fleeing war, oppressive regimes, or the poverty of their homeland, each of us has a family member who left their friends, family, and home with the promise of a better future for their descendants. It is because of their sacrifices that we are able to stand here today on the unceded territory of the Tk'emlúps-te-Secwepemc as humbled guests. It is because of their courage to leave everything they knew that we are able to call Turtle Island home. To pay tribute to our family members, we named our association 5 Future Daughters.
Once we realized that we had this connection, we knew we wanted to do something that assisted immigrant families. From our research, we noticed that there are a lot of resources that already exist about immigration, specifically sponsorship. But even as law students, these resources were very difficult for us to navigate. As well, many of the resources were either not free, required a lot of personal information, or would simply suggest to speak to a lawyer. So we wanted to address these problems and make this area of law more accessible, because helping family shouldn't be complicated.
We developed the Immigration Family Sponsorship Guide specifically for users in Canada who are seeking to sponsor family members under the family class. Currently, the app can assist users on 3 different issues: whether the user is likely eligible to sponsor a family member, whether a user's family member is likely eligible to be sponsored under the family class, and the minimum necessary income a user must meet in order to become a sponsor, which Anissa will now explain.
The heart of our app is the minimum necessary income calculator, which is a feature completely unique to our guide. To sponsor a family member, a sponsor must meet a minimum income requirement for the 3 tax years preceding their application. This amount is based on the number of individuals a sponsor will be financially responsible for. Currently, the Government of Canada only provides M&I information through a chart and requires users to calculate their M&I themselves. As you can see, this is just a lot of numbers thrown at users. Unlike the government website, our app does all the work for you. The calculator can determine the M&I requirement for an infinite number of people, a feature especially useful for large or blended families. While this feature is helpful, we wanted to take our calculator to the next level. In addition to calculating the M&I needed for the 3 tax years, the calculator also determines whether a user's income meets the requirement, and if not, how much they need to meet it. To make this calculator even more helpful, we also included an option for users who have a cosigner. So let's see the calculator in action using a member of the team. Let's say Maria's mother, Naveen, would like to sponsor her mother, Vivian. Currently, Naveen and Maria's father are financially responsible for 7 individuals. Maria's parents will have to prove their income meets the M&I requirement for 8 individuals total. Entering this amount and the income for both Naveen and Meena, the calculator produces a detailed financial report determining the M&I amount for 8 individuals, their combined income, and whether they meet this income. As you can see, Maria's parents do meet the M&I required for each tax year.
The financial requirement is only one part of the sponsorship process. Our app also assesses eligibility for potential sponsors and their family members. For the eligibility assessment streams, we essentially translated the eligibility and inadmissibility rules into easily digestible questions. The 2 streams consist mainly of yes or no questions. Because we didn't want users to feel stuck at any points, we also included an unsure option for some of the questions relating to their family members' eligibility. For example, for the question regarding criminal inadmissibility, a user may not know the extent of their family member's criminal history, so they can choose unsure. At the end of the interview, the app will generate a report based on their answers, which Helen and Kim will now go over.
So in order to make immigration more accessible to our users, we wanted to provide them with simple and clear instructions based on their unique situation. As you can see from the report on the screen, at the top, we have a brief answer that clearly states whether the user is likely eligible to sponsor a family. Our reports then inform the user about the specific section in the Immigration and Refugee Act and Regulation that applies to them, as well as immigration services in most provinces, which may provide further guidance to the users. In total, we have around 40 reports based on different scenarios.
There are many areas of immigration that are discretionary and fact-specific, so we were careful with the information that we provided users, as a definite answer was not always possible. As you can see on the screen, there are 4 disclaimers to manage user expectations and to outline the scope of our services. We wanted to make users as prepared as possible by listing information and documents that they would need to gather before they submit an application or speak to a lawyer. For instance, if a sponsor's family member was convicted of a crime, they would want to collect information regarding the nature of the crime, factors related to rehabilitation, when the crime was committed, and the family member's behavior since. Even if the user's family member would be criminally inadmissible or ineligible, they could collect information regarding the conviction to see if they could be exempt from the immigration requirements on other grounds. As you can see on the screen, we provide guidance and resources in our report so the user doesn't experience unnecessary delays in an already very lengthy process.
Maria will now discuss how we implemented user feedback into our app.
While we were developing this app, we wanted to keep in mind the needs of potential users. Therefore, we made sure our app caters to a number of category of users, beginning with the tech-savvy user who knows how to navigate and use technology. Our app provides this type of user with and simplicity, which goes a long way towards user satisfaction. Our app also caters to the confused family member and non-tech savvy users. For example, when we tested it on my mom, who's looking to sponsor my grandmother, we knew it was important to define key terms, keep the questions short and simple, and use plain language as much as possible. For example, here is a more complicated word we decided to define to help users avoid having to use outside resources to find out what things mean. We also anticipated many users would not speak English or English would just not be their first language, so we decided to have a Google Translate option.
So where do we go from here? Some ideas we have to develop our app further include adding information for other streams of sponsorship, as well as adding a how to apply section that walks users through the sponsorship and immigration process, including what documents they need, where to apply, and the deadlines they need to meet. These are just a couple of the ways we think the Immigration Family Sponsorship Guide can be developed to help even more families, because helping families shouldn't be complicated.
We would like to give a special thank you to all the judges for taking the time to be here with us today. A big thank you to Professor Sykes for all of her guidance. We would also like to thank Kevin Mulcahy and all of the staff at NEOTA for helping us develop this app. And lastly, we would like to thank Maria's mom, Naveen, for testing our app. We would now like to invite everyone in the audience to test the guide. For those of you online, please feel free to scan the QR code on your screen. And for those of you in the audience, we'll be handing out some QR codes on our cards. We would now like to open the floor to any questions.
There we go.
There we go.
That's fantastic.
I love the personal aspect of it. I think, you know, part of presenting in any situation is being able to tell a story. And if there's a personal connection, it's a more powerful story. So I think you did a great job with that. And I thought your presentation was really great. I think there are some real anxiety. So I'm from Courthouse Library. So there are 30 locations and courthouses around the province. And we get people in who are using our public computers in order to help themselves with their legal issues. Immigration is one of the real high emotion kind of things. And so I worried a little bit when we got to that. We made light of that question around criminal. Have you ever committed a criminal act or been convicted of a criminal act? I mean, there are lots of countries where someone might be convicted locally of something that, you know, that is going to cause problems, but there's going to be some serious anxiety around that question. And some of the information around what it means, one way or another, or what it means to your process would be, I think, really helpful at a time when they're going to be looking at that and just wondering, will how I answer make a difference in all of our lives? And will someone know that I answered yes to this? You know, like there's all sorts of things tied up in that I no longer take for granted that simple questions are really simple to people who are in super stressful situations. So I just offered that one little piece to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And I think our reports try to kind of handle that situation by including different resources where they haven't reached the end of the line necessarily. It's just maybe another step in the road that they need to bring up with their lawyer. And I think in terms of criminal inadmissibility, it's, you know, even after that's occurred, people can apply for ministerial relief and try to still come to Canada. It's as long as they're not a threat to the national interest of Canadians, they can definitely, you know, still come here. But I agree that the emotional aspect needs to definitely come up more in the app. Yeah.
It just makes the education component of what you're trying to do that much more important to be really aware that it drops people's ability to accept, retain, and comprehend information when emotion is involved. So how you pitch it needs to be a little bit conscious of that.
I really like that comment, and then to just, aside from the fact that this is not the end of the road for them, I think we can maybe include some sort of disclaimer to say that we don't store any of the data that's given to us, and that there's no storage for any of this stuff. So I think that's a really good point. Actually, maybe we could include a little disclaimer about that. Yeah. Questions?
I really, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I really liked this. I thought this was really persuasive. I was curious, I'm imagining immigration might be a space in which people have developed apps before, and having no knowledge about that, and really liking how targeted your project was and how focused it was. Wonder if you can shed any light about sort of things that have been created before in this space, immigration, law, information, app technology, and sort of where things have worked and where things haven't worked so well, and maybe to take that even a bit further, why specifically you might have chosen this space, if that ties into any of that background piece that you did.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. So while we were doing this, while we were doing a lot of the research, we definitely did look up, does this tool exist out there? There definitely has to be something. There's so much about immigration out there, and there is a lot. There is so much out there. There's a plethora of resources out there. The problem is that when you go through these things, like I was saying, a lot of them aren't free. A lot of them require you to put in a bunch of personal information at the forefront without you even going through an assessment. They ask you for a lot of information. There was a website that I went through that you would click a form assessment. I just went through their initial website, and then there'd be like a form assessment, check if you're eligible. And it took me to a retainer agreement. And at the end, it was like $500 USD to pay for this. And so there was like a PayPal thing. So that's the problem with a lot of these resources. There's a ton. There's definitely a ton, and immigration is fully saturated with a ton of resources. Problem is that a lot of them aren't directed to exactly what the person wants to hear. Am I eligible or am I not? And not saying that our app gives that answer, yes or no. It's just, and no app can really give the exact answer. It's just, can we simplify the process? How do we simplify it without you giving us a ton of information, of personal information, without you having to pay anything, without you having to go through all of that. So, also, no other app has ever had the MNI calculator. That is completely unique to our app, and no other resource that we went through or looked at has that feature. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything.
Sarah was kind of,
Yes.
Sarah, go ahead.
I think this app is great. All the apps this year are so strong. It's a very impressive work that you've all done. I think this is great. I really like the way that you have simplified down something that I imagine can feel really overwhelming to people, and make it into something that actually has steps that you can answer, like, questions that you can actually answer that lead to an outcome that you can understand. I really like that. And the financial calculator is great as well. It really puts a lot of kind of guesswork out of it for people. I'm sure a lot of people have trouble navigating things like financial tables of information, and so separating it out like that is great. I did agree with Caroline that it felt very rational, like it was a very kind of legal, it's like, as in law, it's like we're all supposed to be these kind of like hyper rational beings, and I did think that putting just a little bit more like, I don't know if I want to say hand holding, but just a little bit more reassurance, because I think that in that moment, it's such an emotional issue for so many people that just helping people understand what they're looking at, and making it a little bit more clear that even if the answer is no, that there's ways to move forward. So for example, like, there's slightly different rules if it's a spouse, there's slightly different rules if it's a child. Like, Not that you have to get into every bit of detail around that, but to say at the front, or, you know, when you get the report, maybe, this is what our app says. There maybe is situations where this is not the case. That would be my suggestion, is just helping with that navigation of the emotional and the personal aspect a little bit more clearly.
Thank you, Sarah. That is actually in the report. So in the reports, we do actually say, here is the answer. You're most likely eligible, you're most not likely eligible. But that's not the end of the road. We do offer options and recommendations. You can speak to a lawyer, and here are some of the questions that a lawyer may ask you. Here are some documentation that a lawyer may ask you to bring forward. We definitely, and we have 4 disclaimers throughout the app to tell you that we do not give a determinative answer. We cannot give a determinative answer because immigration is so discretionary. And we say that at every single point, at every one of those 4 stages. And in the report, we do offer, this is what the regulation says, or this is what the act says, but this is not the end of it for you. And so we definitely did think of that when we were going through. We didn't want the users to feel hopeless when they got a no, because we can't really say no.
I appreciate what you're saying. I just, because I ran through the app myself before we got on the call today, and it felt like the report was kind of a big block of text that people might feel intimidated about reading. And so if you carry on with this, and I would encourage you to, because it's a great thing, I would just look at some of the user experience of how you present the disclaimer. Because I think people are used to just clicking through disclaimers on websites without really reading what they're signing. And if you just, I don't know, pulled it out somehow or made it bold, that just because this says this doesn't mean that's the final answer. That would be my suggestion for going forward.
Yeah, no, that's a good suggestion. I think that the reports are a bit lengthier just because immigration law has so many sections and it's so specific. So we tried to cut it down as much as we could, but there were some things that we thought were necessary for the user to know at the end of the process so that they could take that to their lawyer and communicate, you know, this is a section that I was told from the app that, you know, I might be ineligible under. So that's kind of how we approached it, but I definitely think that, you know, the emotional aspect needs to be considered, and definitely the user experience more so in the report section.
Can audience members ask questions?
Yes. Tom?
Tom's great.
Sure, well, thank you. I've got 3 pieces of feedback. First of all, I think the app had a compelling value proposition in your M&I calculator. I think it was very focused, and I think that's pretty powerful. A couple of key takeaways for me was the assistance that you were going to get if you're going through this app. One standout thing was the definition bubble. I thought that was really helpful, along with having the ability to have translation happen. And it was interesting because when I was traveling in Peru this summer, and kind of the final piece of feedback, just because people think they understand it doesn't mean they understand it in their own language. So I thought that was great. They might have enough fluency to kind of get the gist of it, but then drill down into their other language for further discernment. And the final thing was, I thought it was neat how you capped it off with a QR code. When I was traveling in South America, there was QR codes everywhere, like on the sides of buses, on the sides of buildings. It was something that I don't commonly see here yet. And I thought, well, this is an interesting way to maybe reach people where they're at. And I also saw everyone with a mobile device, which is where I could imagine someone, if they're having a discussion with their family, well, should we immigrate to Canada? Knowing where they stand before they reach out to someone that may not be trusted is a great way to start that process. So congratulations. I thought it was well done.
Thank you very much.
Did you talk to anybody at Immigration Canada about it? I'm just curious.
At Immigration Canada, but we did speak to a lawyer, an immigration lawyer.
Okay.
Yeah, about this. And yeah, she was the one that told us the area of law is very, very discretionary and you cannot say yes or no. So that's kind of, we talked to her as we were developing the app. So a lot of her feedback was put into the app. Yeah. Yes.
So I think you did something brilliant because you did find the one place where you can say yes or no. and that's the money. And because you can, there's a black line and it's confusing and it's really hard for a person to get to that black line and to know what are the factors, how close am I to getting across the line? And I just feel that that's such an important place and it's such a thing that we want computers to do. I mean, the word computer, we used to apply to people who did row calculations. Well, we don't have, those people don't have to do that anymore because we have this computer. So you guys took that and had a computer do the work. And then you also just made it clear, what's my pathway? Like how much do I need to get? Do I need to get a cosigner? How close am I to getting this? So I thought that that piece was just completely brilliant. And even like just served a really important purpose. And did the one thing that you could say yes or no on, we got it. And you nailed it. So I think that provides a huge amount of value. I was really happy to see that. And then the other things too are providing people value and sort of walking through, you know, where are the lines, where are these lines? And yes, these lines are flexible and definitely working on that language and working on what you can and cannot say it is important, but providing at least an idea of where some of those lines are, I think is great. I was really happy to see that. In working through it, I think I found one thing that didn't maybe work in the decision tree as I looked at it. Being someone who was a citizen, you then ask if they were ever subject to a removal order. And so I'm not sure, maybe you guys thought work this out as in maybe they were subject to the removal order before they became a citizen, but I thought if you were a citizen, you wouldn't have to ask them that question, but maybe I'm not understanding it. But I almost thought like, if you say I'm a citizen, then you could skip the removal order question, but maybe not.
No, you're right. I think we do need to skip that question.
Oh, cool.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. I thought I could provide some value. Anyway, great work.
Yeah, really good.
So, being close to the immigration process personally, is this MNI calculator?
Yes.
Is that kind of the barrier to entry? Is that what immigrant families, is that the first thing where they're like, well, is that the first question that needs to be answered before they even entertain the rest of it? Because if so, then this is great. And that's what my question was. You know, if you're thinking about bringing somebody over, is the money then kind of the first hurdle?
Yeah, I think it depends. The first question would likely be whether you're a Canadian citizen, a registered Indian, or a permanent resident. And I think that kind of, after you figure out that you have a family member that could sponsor you, you can go to the MNI calculator to then see whether they're making enough income, how many dependents they actually have, and how many people they're able to actually feasibly support with their financial income. So I think it kind of depends whether or not you actually have a family member and whether they're actually eligible. So
I think I think the financial aspect is a big one. There are that many barriers to entry, but the financial one is at the forefront. If you can get this one, yes, no, that's a big one.
And I don't mean legally, and I don't mean from a lawyer's perspective or a law student's perspective. I mean from people sitting around their table going, you know, could we bring someone or could we get someone to bring us over? I'm guessing that's the first big question. And what's great about this app is that it puts them on the path to answering the other questions eventually.
100%. In terms of the personal aspect, yeah, 100%. That's something that family is dealing with. The first thing that you ask for is like, can we financially do this or not?
Right.
So yes, 100%, you're on the right track. The MNI calculator, the heart of the app, is essentially a really big obstacle to people.
That's the kitchen table conversation.
Exactly. This is the big one. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions? Thank you so much.
So now our judges have a very, very tough task ahead of them. And they're going to sort of duck out a little bit. For as long as it takes. I hope it's not too long, but I wouldn't want to try to do this fast. So those of us who are here, we have some snacks so we can chat. If you're on the webinar, there'll be sort of a bit of dead time. And to kind of yell when everyone's back. I think typically it's about, but no promises.
See you in the judges' room, judges.
Thank you.
Fully raised. Yep. So it is the moment of truth. This is also my chance to sneak in. There was someone important that I want to give attention to, and it's Jeffrey Pablo, who is our TA. She's a real expert at the expert system, and she supported all the teams. So she's also to thank for the wonderful work. So the judges have made a decision, and now we get to hear what they decided.
So I think first, Christine and I will probably stand up here and just talk about a few things about how wonderful everything was. I did want to mention and maybe an ode to what you guys have done. As I walked down the hall, we walked by your lovely law library. And because I'm a late bloomer and I came to law late, I still had some anxiety that came up as I went by the law library and thought, I'm really glad I'm not on the other side of the glass tonight. So my heart goes out to you in all the work you had to do in your normal lives, in your legal lives, and then you still put together these amazing apps that we all saw. That probably took a heck of a lot of time and a heck of a lot of headspace and passion. And I really wanted to applaud all of you guys because you have created something, each group has created something that's really valuable and that I'd love to see. So I wanted to just do a hand for everybody.
I also wanted to say, as someone who pays attention to presentation, you guys did a great job on presentation. I was really impressed. It's not easy. You did smooth passes. You had concepts and themes. You understood what each of you was doing. This was not a last minute kind of throw together thing. You guys did really good work and it showed through. And I will say that kind of preparation and attention to how you present really matters in what you're going to be doing. And it doesn't matter whether you ever get outside of an office or into a court or not, those kinds of skills are really important. And so the more chances you get to practice them, the better off you're going to be. And you did great. Every one of you did really great. We were all saying on the break how high the standard is this year. Like we were just gobsmacked at having the difficult challenge of having to figure out how we would decide among three really good ideas.
And we also wanted to say that all three of these had legs. So we wanted to say that definitely encourage you guys to continue in these pursuits. Yeah. Have we said enough good stuff about everything?
Anybody online want to say anything
yes,
good?
Please.
Sarah, I concur. I was really impressed. Sorry, Sarah, if I jumped in. But well done, everyone. And it was a sincere pleasure and privilege to observe all your hard work. And I mean that sincerely. So thank you.
I agree. It was a tight race this year. So I think you all did really well.
And so we have chosen a winner, and some of the things that we really liked was obviously tackling a very important problem, really understanding the user and the needs of the user, and giving the user something that could potentially really change and help their situation. And we feel that was present across the board. But we feel that one group really shone in delivering that. And so we'd like to invite Ben, Mike, and Paggy down here. Oh, you're very welcome. You're very deserving. Please enjoy.
Hey, everyone.
Take a picture of your phone,
And do we have prizes for everybody? Because everyone was a winner.
Oh. So great.
And remember, you got to share that.
Kevin, did you want to say?
Yeah, Katie, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Would it be possible to get that last team up there one more time with that giant Stanley Cup trophy?
Yeah.
Because I want to get a screen capture. I've been taking screen captures throughout the night. I love all three teams. I know how much work they all put in. And I'd love to get one picture with that giant cup if I could. And if you could look up toward the camera where I am, I must be up in the rafters. All right. Everybody shift to your right a little bit so we don't get, there we go, perfect. Now hold it up. This is, oh my God, this is the World Cup. Shoot. Just a little to your right, a little more. Sorry. Thank you, perfect. All right, okay, 1, 2, 3. And we got it. Thank you so much. All right, I'm happy. We got the Stanley Cup. And everybody deserves it. I mean, I think, Katie, you know that this group of students worked really hard and they got into it. Their heads got into it. They discovered the power of programming, you know. So a couple of people had some experience with programming and I hope they liked the ability to do it without traditional coding. But for most people in these courses, they've never done any programming of any kind. And when they can make the computer do what they want it to do, it's a thrill. And you see a crazy energy that comes. And we saw it. And I could go online and I saw people working at all hours of the night. And I saw people being very fastidious about what they wanted to accomplish and asking for, you know, guidance on obscure points. And I saw people finding things in the user manual and implementing them on their own. So, and you know, and on that calculator for sponsorship, we looked around, there's nothing else like it out there. So you gotta put that out there for people. And nor was there anything on Pet Trust either. So there you go. We got 3 winning apps. So thanks very much. Everyone at Neota really appreciates the opportunity to be part of this.
And this wouldn't exist without you. Helped so much, all of us. Like every time we've all talked to all the teams, like anytime we've needed you, you popped on in an instant. Even this morning when I emailed you at 3 a.m. your time last night, when I was like, please help. You instantly did. So really, thank you so much.
A big hand for Kevin.
I would echo everything that everyone has said. When Kevin said this group of students worked really hard, that means the whole group, everyone, as he said, started from never having seen Neota before, right, in September, and worked very, very hard all the way through the semester, kind of learning about their areas, learning about the people who would use their tools and what they needed, learning how to make it happen in Neota, and it's just incredible to see these projects blossom in a really short time. I hope you all keep on with it, and all of you won, really. All the judges sort of were telling me, you know, not just to the room, how high the standard was and how impressed they were this year. And you know, it's been good in other years too, so it's not like you know, you're meeting a high bar. So that,
I think they set a new standard. I'm sorry.
yeah,
I think that was a pretty high standard.
It was really like very, very impressive. We should all be really, really proud of it. And keep going on automating expertise because the world needs it, really. So we are at the end of our time. Those of us who are here, we get to hang out a bit more together. Kevin, thank you so much for everything. Sarah and Tom, thanks for being to this. In Sarah's case, it's been like years and years and years, right? Sarah was doing this before we even had an apps course. We had like a predecessor and she was helping with that. So we really appreciate your input and your encouragement and your support being here when we have a ton of other things to do. With that, we will end the formal proceedings and continue with the informal proceedings. So thanks everybody who's here online. And I think I'll shut it off now. Can I shut it off? Do I need courage?
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have fun. Have a good night.
I was just like,